This is the Fly Culture Podcast with me, your host, Pete Tigis. Gilly Bate is a well-known face on many of the chalk streams around Hampshire. As a fishing guide and instructor, she spends many hours on the crystal water. I sit down and talk about fishing, get some fishing advice, the state of the chalk streams, and a whole lot more. Welcome everyone to the very latest Fly Culture podcast. It is the end of October, it's almost Halloween time. I am sitting very close to the River Test. I'm in the company of a good friend, Gilly Bate, who is a fishing guide and all-round superstar with the fly rod. So I thought it would be really interesting to chat to her about fly fishing in general, the chalk streams, and get some hints and tips as well, and go from there. So Gilly, it's really cool to be down here. Thank you for having me along.
Oh, well, thank you, Pete, for asking. I'm very honoured to be part of your podcast and part of Fly Culture. It's great. Great fun.
I'm super excited, as we always do with the Fly Culture podcasts, that we're going to go and do some fishing afterwards. So we're at Long Parish this morning.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about it, the fishing here?
Upper Test, so we've got trout, we've got wild trout in there. We do stock it during the summer months. And we've also got plenty of grayling, although the river today is a little bit coloured, but which is very unusual. But at this time of year, the river keepers are allowed to do work. There's a cut-off period where if they've got some maintenance and stuff, so it is a bit coloured. But we'll go and have a play and see what we can find. And it's nice and warm today, so we might get some insects coming off. We'll just have to see.
And do the grayling rise pretty readily here?
They can do, yeah. It can be really good. If you get a decent hatch, which is normally about middle of the day, you'll get them coming off, which can be so nice. Otherwise, we'll have to get down deep with some dirty nymphs.
Absolutely fine by me. I'll do it. I'll try anything. What sort of season have you had? Has it been a good season? I guess you've been super busy out on the river.
Yeah, it's been really good, really busy as always, as it is for everybody. And no, it's good. The problem we have had this year, it's been very, very low water levels. And actually, quite interestingly, although we're up in the Upper Test up here, the river has actually held itself quite well up here, whereas the middle beats, which obviously normally are quite high and full and they've got the big fish, they had real problems. It was very low, and also sort of people doing catch and release, trying to get them to bring fish in quickly was a bit of a problem because they get very stressed with low oxygen. So that was a bit of a problem. And also with that heat, the fish tend to sit a bit doggo. They're not so keen to come up and rise. So really for fishing, you want to be kind of morning or late, preferably late when they're out on the sedges in the evening. But apart from that, it's been a great season. But we're just hoping this winter we get lots of rain, because the chalk streams, we can get rain in the summer, but we get very little lift, because what happens is the water that falls just goes into the ground and doesn't fill the aquifer. So it's the rains that we get January, February, March, which really tell us what kind of a season we're going to have. So if we've had a lot of big dump of rain now, which will be good hopefully for next year, but we do need rain in January, February, and then it will be a good season for everybody, hopefully.
Well, fingers crossed for that. And how have the hatches been? Have they been good for you?
Hatches have been mixed up and down the river, and I think that just it's one of those things, if you only were here last Thursday kind of thing.
Yeah.
It can depend. Sometimes I had people this summer emailing me saying, I've been out fishing and there's nothing hatching. Then looking on Instagram, and Instagram's great for some of the river keepers putting terrific posts up. Nick Parker's very, very good. He's down on Lower Brook on the Test. Really good at putting photographs of hatches. And some of the hatches, 8 o'clock in the evening, 9 o'clock in the evening, have been absolutely terrific. Or the spinnerfall as well. One of the problems we've had is that people come to the test for the day, 9 till 5, and they've all left. And actually, really in the summer, you should be coming later in the day and staying later. But they've been good up here. We've seen, I was talking earlier, in fact, last couple of years we've had very few iron blue up here, They're one of the first insects to actually disappear when there's a problem in the water. And this year we've had some really nice hatches again of iron blue. And so that's really been great to see. So there are problems in the test, like all of the rivers, but then sometimes you get hatches coming back off again. So you've got to be positive about it. But there are problems there.
It's one of the interesting things, talking to people throughout this year since we started the podcast. Generally, I've been asking that question about hatches, and it's been pretty okay, I think.
It seems to be. It's all. I'm an eternal optimist, and I love life, and so I go out there. I think, oh, this is amazing. I mean, I was here a couple of weeks ago in the rain, and it was just the pale water is coming off, which is phenomenal. I mean, couldn't believe it was raining, and it was such a good hatch. So you have days like that, but then I speak to older guides who've been on the river for a very, very long time, and they just shake their heads at me and say, Gilly, you've no idea what it used to be like. And particularly in the mayfly period, they say, you'd arrive at the beat and your windscreen and your car would just be absolutely covered in mayfly. That we don't get it. It's not like that.
I guess we didn't know that, and so you take what you
take what you know.
Yeah.
I think last year I was very lucky enough to go to Bosnia in October, grayling fishing, and when I was out there, I could not believe the blue-winged olive hatches throughout the day, the spinnerful in the evening. It was unlike anything I'd witnessed on the test. The difference is they haven't got, I hate to say it, I'm married to a farmer, but they haven't got modern agriculture out there. They haven't got abstraction. They've not got the problems that we've got here. And it showed. It really showed.
I had one, actually the best blue-winged olive hatch I've ever seen was on the Wiley.
Yeah.
And that was one evening, and it was just phenomenal. And I will remember that for as long as I live. I've never seen another one since. I stayed over, it was so good.
Yeah.
Next evening, nothing. It was. It must have just been one.
But
of the
that's one of the problems. You that's exactly how fishing. Well, we all know how fishing works, and some days it's just fantastic. You can go the next day on the same beat, the same conditions, and it just doesn't happen.
It makes you come back, doesn't it?
Of course it does. That's why we all love it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go, as we like to do with these things, let's go to the beginning. And has it always been fishing? Has it always been fly fishing? Where did that come into your life?
Actually really didn't like fly fishing at all. I just didn't get it at all. I sadly, my family, my father and brothers, they were not interested in fly fishing. But I was very lucky. I was brought up in Scotland, and I ran riot around Scotland, really, on the islands and the countryside. And I was always seeing, you would see people out there fishing. So I was always aware and seeing people tickling salmon and proper fly fishermen. And I used to catch fish in jam jars as a little girl. And I spent my whole time, I think I was probably quite feral actually. I would eat my lunch to get outside as quickly as possible. I always wanted to be outside, but it was ponies for me. Anyway, fast forward, I married a farmer. And basically he's a really keen angler, and it was because of my husband and then 2 sons that I was introduced to fly fishing.
Right. I first heard about you, funnily enough, I was guiding on the Nadder
at
Dinton Mill, and I was working for people who used to take the mill. And I would guide for them, and I'd go in the staff quarters and they'd have stuff like that, which was really good fun. And your husband was fishing, and he said, hey, do you know... My wife's a fishing guide. This was many years ago now.
I can't believe.
Time ago.
Interesting, you're talking about the Nadder. So we're very lucky. We've got lakes at home full of stock rainbows, and that's where I first started catching fish, was these rainbows, and just using a Montana for about 2 years. And I thought it was absolutely fantastic because that's how I caught fish. And then my father-in-law took me to the Nadder, and I was on beat 4, and I can remember it still, on a corner. And there was a fish rising. My father-in-law, who I don't know how old he was at the time, but anyway, I cast out, and then everything changed. That was the beginning of the change, because it just blew me away.
And how long ago was that?
I'm trying to think. I was probably about 35. I'm now 56, so yeah, quite a long time ago. But that was the beginning, and that was when I really thought rivers are for me. This is a different ballgame altogether. I just love this because it was a hunting thing, and it was you against one fish. It wasn't just any random fish, and it was the skill. And it never stops.
And that's the thing, I suppose. The added thing with chalk streams as well is that you get to see the fish as well. So...
Yeah, and but it is. But one of my problems is because I've been very fortunate that my fishing is the chalk streams, but it's kind of one-dimensional in that you're looking for the fish. So in a way, you're not really reading the water. And when I went from chalk streams to other rivers in Wales or up north fishing for trout, it was how to read a river, because if it's coloured, how do you know where the fish are? So I think the chalk streams has taught me a huge amount, but definitely it limited me as well when I went to fish other places. So for me, I try and fish as many places, as I can now. And now when I look at a river, I don't see it in one dimension, I see it in three. And I'm analysing every aspect of that water flow, of the current, of the corners, of the shade of the trees, of the riverbed. It just goes on and on and on. And figuring out, okay, if I can't see a fish, where are there going to be fish? And that's great, because it ups your game completely.
It's really interesting, because the joy for me today is being able to see the fish.
Yeah.
And that is funny, isn't it?
I get that. And we're lucky, because it generally it doesn't colour.
Yeah.
So even if it's been pouring with rain, you can still go fishing. And that's the joy of the chalk streams, is it's crystal clear. It's fabulous. Yeah.
And so that's really been your spiritual home from a fishing point
completely
of view.
Because I don't live that far away.
Yeah.
It's and luckily client base is from London, which is an hour away, and and also it's so beautiful. I'm so privileged.
Yes.
But I do love fishing locally where I am. I've got the River Rother, which is a completely different ball game. It starts as chalk stream but changes quite quickly. The substrate changes. And I've learnt an awful lot from just fishing there for wild fish, because sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's like cocoa, but they'll come up very readily to a fly if you put it in the right place. So I love that equally. I know that sounds kind of odd when you've got these beautiful estates that I go on, but I love the difference between the two. It's great.
The Rother is an interesting one. I remember, who's the guy? Chris Sanford.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It looked fascinating stream. They have a nice a run of sea trout as well, don't they?
They do. That's much further. Where I am, I fish it quite close to source, which means it's still, as I say, it comes out of the chalk, hits its ironstone, I believe, on the bottom, so it slightly changes. But I'm up quite close, so it's different to weather. But yeah, it's a long bit of water, and the sea trout, all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
And so, coming back to your fishing, when you started, were you having instruction, or David gave you instruction?
My husband, my husband taught me, which actually was, dare I say it, probably the worst thing. Yeah. And actually, dear friends as well. My husband's friends all took me out, and they were all very, very keen and very, very kind to me. But the reason I got into kind of the instruction side was my children went on children's courses. The Hampshire branch of Salmon and Trout Association ran these kids' days. And I would go along and make coffee and chat to people, and they would have guides there. They would have qualified instructors there. And I came across a young instructor called Simeon Hay, young Sim, whose dad owned the Rod Box. And Sim would have probably been in his 20s then. I would have been late 30s, I think. And watching him cast, I suddenly thought, oh my God, this is like dressage. How do you do that? How can you make that so effortless and beautiful? And so Sim gave me a few lessons, and I then met more instructors, and I just thought, I want to get better. I want to do this. So I did the Game Angling Instructor Certificate, and I think I was one of the last people to go through that, because they've changed it all now, I believe. But I did that a long time ago, and just really because I wanted to up my game. It wasn't because I wanted to be an instructor, I just wanted to get better. But inevitably, I then started teaching people, and I then got asked to work for Orvis a long time ago, which was fantastic. So I started working for Orvis, and I also managed to get, I met a chap shooting, and he then said, well, why don't you come and guide? And that was down at Timsbury. Jonathan Durrant let me go down at Timsbury, which actually was quite hard, because it's very deep water, very wide there, and probably, difficult to actually start guiding on. But that was both those two things happened at the same time, and it changed my life.
And do you remember those first days? Do you remember, I know I've talked to Nick, and I think Nick Hart, who we've sat here with as well, haven't we? He remembers his first client. I remember do you remember that first day?
I remember my first times going out, and being kind of overly keen. I mean, when I look back, I kind of think, crikey, I got away with it. I didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest. But I got away with it, and I was lucky at Orvis in that I worked under and with two much older guides, John Slader and Graham Woods, fantastic seasoned guides who taught me so much about fishing, looking after people. But I do remember and being very much, this is the test, this is hallowed water, it's upstream dry fly, and I've got to look the part, and I know it's changed so much since those days. It was very formal. It's much more formal in those days. Now it's a lot more relaxed, and I don't mean people doing bad things or casting downstream. What I mean is just the kind of attitude and things that people wear. It's completely different now, which is good. It's how it should be.
Yeah. And I remember the first day I even tied some flies for the guys.
Oh, that's really nice.
Popped those in, and you remember all those silly little things, don't you?
Yeah.
From those moments that were special, and I don't think they can ever take those moments away.
No, and I think, the great thing with guiding is, although you're the professional, apparently, when I look back, I don't think I was, but without all that ability, without all that guiding, you learn every single time you go out. Even now, every single time I go out, you still pick up other stuff, and you kind of have to just do it. You have to get out there, and it's great. And the people you meet are fantastic. I've met so many lovely people, and I've had so much help along the way. I've been so lucky.
Fantastic. Yeah. So you say about the change in fishing. We're going to, as I said to you, we hop around a little bit. But have you seen a change in an age dynamic? Are there younger people?
I think there are definitely younger people. Well, I think so. Maybe because my older people are sort of doing their own thing and don't need so much help. I don't know. I think it was definitely more formal, and people were older. I think there's a lot more. There's younger people coming into it. There's definitely more women coming into it. It is changing. It is, which is good. It has to change.
Do you think? And I've had this conversation so many times. Do you think it's always been happening? Yet social media now allows us to see those people that we didn't know about before. So you can see, somebody's been fishing here, and you see the photos, and you think, that's really cool, and people I may not have known about previously when we started.
Oh, definitely. I mean, when you think about it, we didn't have Instagram, so I didn't know what was going on in the river. I didn't know who was fishing on different beats. I think before the Instagram thing and Facebook thing came up, because I was doing a lot of guiding, I was meeting a lot of the river keepers on all the different beats. So I was then getting a much bigger picture of who was out, what was hatching, how it was all working. So I guess Instagram has now taken that over, and it is lovely to see what's going on up and down the river. And I love, I was talking to somebody about it the other day. We've had fantastic beetles. This sounds really silly as a guide. I've been guiding for a long time, but I've never really got into using beetle patterns. This year, because of somebody posting, we were here, in fact, at Lower Mill, and we were watching a fish under a tree, and something popped off the tree. And my client said, "Crikey, it's just taken a berry." And I went, no, they're not vegetarian. I then went up, and we've got bamboo hedging up here. And if you just brush it at that time, there was little blue beetles all over it, and that's what they were feeding on. But that had already gone up on Instagram. And so I love the fact that everybody's in touch with everybody. I think that's great. And it's lovely to see different people, what they're catching on. Yeah, I think it's a great thing.
Seems to be Instagram a more positive place as well. You don't see negative, not that I see. I don't look that closely, I have to say, but it seems as though people enjoy looking at the pictures. There's not comments, there's and generally the comments are really
generally
nice.
I don't know, maybe I just live in a kind of lovely world. I don't know. I've been, touch wood, I'm probably going to get some bad comments now. I've been very fortunate, and I've only had sort of positive stuff, and maybe the people I follow are just really nice people, but I think generally, if we all love what we do, and most of us are all passionate about fishing, you're all kind of like-minded. You will see the odd person, and if that happens, just block them. You don't need to follow them. You don't need to get involved.
And I've sort of detected recently, and with the magazine, as I'm sure you know, that we don't have grip and grins in there.
No.
And I've noticed only in the last month or two more photos of fish photographed in the water, which
I think I have a bit of a bee in my bonnet about it, and I'm sure most of us who love our trout do. And I very much I like photos of fish underwater or just held. And I like to know they're breathing okay. They're kind of in the water. I think one of my pet hates is I've got two pet hates. One of them is I've seen people knuckle their hand so that there's not so much fingers when they're holding a fish. So much fingers, they knuckle under to hold the fish. But if you're holding a grayling, they're really wriggly. And actually it means if you look at those fish, they're being squeezed. I don't understand that. Why, just for the photo, would you do that? And also holding those lovely, beautiful fins up. You don't need to do that. I just please don't do it. Please keep them in the water or near enough. I think most people nowadays are very conscious of it. Yeah.
Good. So let's take you back again. So you started guiding. You talked a little bit about some of the influences early on. Did that continue? Were you continually meeting people along the way that had an impact on your instructing and your guiding?
All the time. Going to the shows, I would go to everything. I was on going back before I'd even qualified. Nowadays, as we know, Instagram, Facebook's massive, but in those days I was sort of searching the internet just to find out, looking at casting. So, was there a YouTube thing of somebody doing roll casts or blah, 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 blah. And I found Paul Arden and Sexy Loops. And that was really the only kind of bunch of guys I could find who were really out there. And I mean, they are really out there. And I joined Sexy Loops and spoke to those guys, and I can't tell you how kind they were to me, because I would read some of their forums and some of their blogs. I didn't understand what they were talking about. It was another language, the technicality of fly casting and rod design. But they never made me feel that, although I commented, it was a stupid comment or it wasn't worthy of their attention. And they were fantastic. And actually, after I was qualified at Gaia, Paul Arden did this instructors day. So I went over thinking, I'm an instructor, I'm one of them. And actually I realised I was a child in comparison to these guys casting. One of the funniest things, what rods are we going to use? And I was quite sort of, oh yes, I need to use this rod because it's the best rod and blah, blah, blah. And Paul picked up the bottom of an Orvis rod and he then stuck the middle bit of a Sage rod. He did it for effect. And it's so silly because how can you do that? Now I know how he can do that, and he could pick up anything, cast anything. But it was great, and I met Mike Heritage. I met so many lovely people from those very early days, and they actually stayed with me. And when I went to do my AAP guy, when I took the provisional, some of those guys were there, and Paul ran over to the car, having only met him once, and said, "Right, Lee Cummings is here, and he's gonna help you." And Carl,
Hutchinson.
No, not Carl. Lassie, sorry.
Lassie Carlson, yeah.
Lassie Carlson were there, and he said they're going to go and give you a quick sharpener before you take your exam tomorrow. How privileged was I to have those two help me? I mean, just blew me away. And they must have spent 2 hours with me, just, fine-tuning those little things. Ian May, the dearly departed, we'll talk about Ian later. Ian had been my mentor and taught me, and I think Ian was slightly alarmed that they had sort of grabbed a hold of me, but to be honest, they put the polish on it, they put the icing, and that's what I'm saying. I've been so lucky. So many guys along the way. When I was doing the Gaia, I had Mac Lambert, great guy who I can't tell you how fantastic and how much support he gave me in those early days. And just so many. David Griffiths, do you remember David Griffiths?
Don't really.
He sadly died a few years ago, and just so many people at so many shows of all. With Charles Jardine, he's helped me. I remember meeting Charles for the first time when a long time ago, and I could hardly speak when I met him. It was like meeting a god. I had his books, and crikey, I'm doing a day. I'm working with Charles Jardine. And he was so kind, so nice. And Gilly, you're an instructor. You're just the same as me. Not really, Charles, but thank you. That's so kind of you. So I've been so lucky. How
do you find that when you're fishing? Because you mentioned Charles there, I used to, and I may again have mentioned this, and apologies if I did in another podcast, that I used to find I was under pressure when I fished, because you're a guide, so you're supposed to catch all the fish, and if you didn't, you must be crap. And so you'd start a day if you didn't know the people so well. And
what if you're with friends that are qualified?
Or people just with people you may not know so well, that you're fishing a friend of a friend or something like that, and you're introduced as a fishing guide, instructor, everything else, and it's kind of you're an instructor, oh really? And then you think, oh right, I've got to, and the turning point for me was fishing with Charles on my home river, the Tor, and his lovely attitude to it all, and how he was relaxed about it. And subsequently, I've been, like yourself, I'm sure, been fortunate to fish with so many wonderful fly anglers. And again, Paul Proctor on this one mentioned, we all get stuck in trees. We all stuff
absolutely.
a cast. But I had it in my head that I couldn't do that. I couldn't. And it used to make me quite tense about fishing. I've long since thrown those shackles and they've long gone. But I almost felt a sort of a kind of a pressure. And I'm fishing with Charles, seeing that, and there was a fish rising in a back eddy. I can picture it in my mind now. And he cast and the fish didn't take, and there was a bit of drag. It was a really tough cast.
Yeah.
But he looks at me, laughed, and said, "We're supposed to be good at this, aren't we?" And I thought, if he can say that, it must be fine. So
I think, I would agree with that. I don't know. I think I feel pressure of people kind of with me. I'm a bit like Paul Proctor in that when I go fishing, if I'm with people that know me well know they just leave me alone now, because I think to catch well and to catch a fish that's really difficult, which is what I'm always trying to find, I need to concentrate. I need to be on my own, and I do find it difficult sometimes when I've got people around. But I fished the other day with Paul and another friend, and I just wasn't on it. I just wasn't. My head wasn't in the right place. I just wasn't there. And I've now got to an age. I think I'm not bothered about it. That's how
I think I'm comfortable.
That's how it is. I'm comfortable, and if I make a cock up and I just don't, it doesn't happen. Yeah, but sometimes then you have other days and it's like, I'm out there, a bit competitive. I am competitive, actually.
Oh, yeah, right.
Sometimes, not so much my trout. I find my trout's what I do, but when I'm bone fishing with my husband, I'm very competitive.
That's interesting, that one. I think I took it up because it wasn't. But it's each, you can drag all sorts of different angles
I'm
into
not
it.
competitive with other people. I'm competitive with
yourself.
myself.
That's a good answer.
Competitive with myself. I always want to be getting better and catching that fish that I can't catch. But I think, hopefully, I've had enough years that if it doesn't, sometimes you just not. I now know that actually sometimes if I'm fishing and it's not happening, I'll just think, do you know what? I'm just going to stop. I'm going to go and have coffee. Whereas before I would have got into more of a tangle and fumbled, and it would have got harder and harder and caught up trees, and it just stop. And when I'm guiding now with clients, I can sometimes see. I actually find it, so obviously I don't have a guide my trout fishing, but when I do bone fishing, there's always a guide on the skiff. And I actually find it really difficult to be guided. I find it really difficult. Somebody telling me what to do, and I feel that's when I feel pressure. Really feel that pressure. And now I kind of, can you just take me to wherever and kind of not say anything, which must be rotten for the guide. Actually, I feel really mean, but
I go through that thing of not saying what you do.
Yeah.
We had a guide actually when we were still heading. We treated ourselves. I'm just back from Oregon and fishing there, and we had a really cool guide. And he sussed us out really quickly, I think. He said, "So do you work in fishing?" And I thought, I don't like lying.
No.
So I said, well, I said I'm more single-handed, but, and we had a great time. We geeked out on casting, and he was showing me rods and line combinations.
That's
he said,
cool.
"Have you got 10 minutes?" And it was really, really good fun. But I think what we can draw from this is that often when I've taken people out, they think there is some huge gap. And it's not as wide as people think in ability. There are some superhumans, and I know we've mentioned them, but it's not as wide, is it, as people think? And everyone makes a bad cast, everyone gets tangled, everyone gets caught in a tree. It is how it is, and that's part of the fun of it, I think.
I very much think so. I think everybody's got a chance of catching, and I'm just you mentioning that, thinking of a very good friend of mine, and I was actually guiding for him. And he hadn't been fishing that long, in fact, only a few years. And there was a very tricky fish right next to the fishing hut on Bossington. And I just know that everybody's been fishing for that fish. And I stupidly said, "Oh, don't worry, you'll never catch that one." And I turned, and he just looked, and I turned around and talked to the riverkeeper, "Gilly, I've got it!" And I just thought, "Fantastic, that's brilliant." Yeah. So there you are. We can all. That's why it's so great. It doesn't matter what age you are. Yeah. It does, we've all got a chance of catching a fish, and that's why it's such an amazing hobby.
No, it's fantastic. I still, I think I love it. I know we were talking off mic earlier, and I think I love it more now than I've ever loved it.
I think really I do as well. Yeah. I don't think I will. I hope I will never ever stop. I can't imagine not wanting to go fishing. It just gets better and better.
So coming back to the chalk streams, how would you describe, I know you touched on aquifers and things like that, if I came from Mars or whatever and heard about red fly culture perhaps, and asked about how would you describe a chalk stream? What is it that you love so much about chalk streams?
I think we touched on it earlier. It's the clarity, and the reason we have the clarity is because the water falls from the sky, goes into the hills, it drains through the chalk, it's stored in these underground aquifers, and then it's released back out through holes back out in and comes out through the earth back onto the river and flows down. And because of all the nutrients that get dissolved along the way, we end up with slightly alkaline water. Now, most of the water, the rivers around the world, are actually slightly acidic, but the water that comes from the chalk is slightly alkaline, and that lovely alkaline water is the perfect environment for the right good weed growth. If you've got good weed growth, you've got good invertebrates. If you've got good invertebrates, you've got lovely trout. You've got great feeding grounds for your fish, and that's what we're all looking for. We're looking for these lovely insects hatching off. And dry fly, I like nymphing, but dry fly for me is what it's all about. I'd rather go and catch one fish and go home on a dry fly than catch 6 on a nymph. It's everything, and also it's being able to watch that fish's movements to understand, is it kind of half asleep, is it agitated, can it see us, is it looking around, is it what I call on the fin, is it kind of right, I'm looking for something. There is nothing like, I will sit for ages just watching a fish and figuring out if it's going to move from its lie. Is it prepared to move? Is it got current above it? Is it got current side of it? How is it reacting? And that's what you get on the chalk streams, and that's the beauty of it.
I think for me as well, I don't get to fishing that often or as much as I used to, but I love that moment when you see that river for the first time. And it's like if I'm a cricket and football fan, if I haven't been for many years, but if I went to Lord's and walk up through and see the ground for the first time, that vivid green, or if I'm at football or wherever it is, and that the same with the river, when you see that first shot of the ranunculus, the weed, whatever it is in the water, and that first shot, and there is something special, isn't there?
I think so. And you see the gravel, the different types of gravel, and it's lovely and it's beautiful. I mean, we're down in Hampshire, Wiltshire, where the majority of the UK chalk streams are. Not that there's not others around the country, but this is my world down here. And the places are stunning. It's very much southern England at its best. I'm incredibly privileged to be down here. Not that I don't like, I love going to Wales and going up north, and it's a different kind of beauty. It's a different kind of beauty.
The really interesting thing about this conversation as well, where we were talking about chalk streams, you'd very much associate the word mayfly and chalk stream. We've not really talked about it. We've talked about iron blues, the hatches, which is kind of nice, which shows that it's not just about end of May, early June. There is fishing the
mayfly is only such a short period. I mean, it's 3 weeks. It's a very, very short period. It's funny. Some people are sort of, mayfly, it's really, it's too easy. I would completely disagree. Sometimes they can be really fussy. To begin with, they're very nervous about taking the proper duns coming off. They're kind of, they're feeding the actual nymphs get very, very big. They're very active just before they hatch. So to begin with, the first few days before they really start coming up, you can see the fish feeding on the nymphs before they actually come up because they're big and they're active. Then they start taking the emergers. Then they're right up on the top, and you get that frenzy. And I'm sorry, I don't care what anybody says. Every single year when I see the first mayfly, my heart leaps. I just think they are magnificent. They are beautiful to see. And the fish love them, and I think it's great. But I love when you get towards the end of the mayfly period and the fish get incredibly fussy. They're fat, they've absolutely gorged themselves, and they're then on the spinner. They're on the spence, and they're quite fussy. You can have all these patterns. You go in the shops, and sometimes they will only choose one. Okay, I know its presentation is really important, and they do get fussy. They've seen a lot of fishermen, but at the end of that period, that it does get hammered. The test in those 3 weeks is hammered up and down, but I still think it's magical. I don't care what anybody says. I think it's fabulous.
And when it's getting, let's talk about the fishing a little bit as we're on that. Say they're getting difficult. What are you thinking about there? Are you thinking about leader length, diameter, as well as that pattern as well? that you're trying to find that?
They're getting difficult towards the end of the Mayfly.
And so what are you doing
because they've seen so many
that's what I mean.
people.
What are you doing to change that? Are you changing your leader diameter, leader length?
Well, the problem is if you're using big mayfly patterns, you can't turn over a big mayfly on lighter leader tippet. So that's one of the problems you've got. I think it's just having a good armoury of patterns and figuring out what everybody else is using. So all the guides are different. We've all got certain ones. You know, I've seen somebody say, "Oh, I always use these," and I think, "Crikey, I'd never use that." And I guess and also it can change. So the top end of the test is slightly different from the middle end of the test. I think the mayfly period people catch well. We then get to the end of it. We then have weed cut, and if you've not seen fish behaviour during weed cut, it's fascinating. You get rafts of weed coming down the river, right from the top down to the middle, where they then take it out. What people don't realise is all that weed dislodges. Can you imagine the shrimp, the nymphs, the caddis larvae, all gets dislodged. So by the time you come back after weed cut, fish are like barrels.
Yeah.
They're all sat there. It's like Christmas. You know, they've eaten, you know, the mince pies. They're all sitting there and they don't want to eat another thing. The hardest period we have is after the mayfly and the June weed cuts, after that June weed cut. And I get nothing but emails from people saying, and also you've got to remember when we cut weed, the river height drops. The weed, it sounds silly, but it actually holds the water up. So we then get a drop in water as well. So all this combination means that particularly if you're on the upper end of the test, which is shallower anyway, the fish can then start to see you. They've seen a lot of fishermen. This is when I start saying, right, everybody uses a 9'5" weight on the middle stretches during mayfly. Some people are using 6 weights. Forget it. When you come back after that weed cut, there is no way you're going to get near those fish. So you've got to drop down. You've got to drop down. You know, I heard Charles the other day gave a talk. Charles Jardine gave a talk, and he was saying, when people play golf, they have all those different clubs. When you go fishing, why would you only have one fishing rod? And I couldn't agree more. You definitely need to have more. One of the problems I have at the top end of the test, where there's a lot of wild fish. The fish that are stocked aren't so big. You can then get down to your 3 weights, and that's where I like to fish with 3 weights. It's much lighter. If you're on that middle test, you've got those big fish. Now this year, where we had very hot weather, low oxygen in the water, you've got to, if you're doing catch and release, which most people these days are, you've got to bring those fish in quickly and not be unkind to the fishermen if they're not used. But if they're not used to playing fish, I stick to a 4 weight. You can hold on to them a bit more. 3 weights, they're a little bit harder for people to bring them in. So it's a balance. But beyond all doubt, lengthen those leaders. And people always buy 9-foot leaders. I rarely fish for the 9-foot leader.
You're longer, I guess.
And it's sorry?
Much longer, I guess.
Much longer. But it's amazing when you say to people, so everybody this year I was saying, go out and buy, you can buy 12-foot leaders from Orvis, from Stroth, there's lots of them. Oh, I don't think I could fish with a 12-foot leader. And I had a lovely chap up here in his 70s, and he said, oh, Gilly, I don't know. Right, so I just put one on. I didn't say anything to him. And he just cast and he went, oh, that was a beautiful presentation. I went, well, I put a 12-foot leader on. And he said, it's so much nicer. Absolutely. And he wrote to me afterwards and said, I can't believe something so simple has made such a difference to my fishing. So 12-foot, 15-foot, just do it. Get out there and do it.
Brilliant. Coming back to guiding again, I guess you were probably almost a lone voice female voice in guiding land. Was that challenging? Was it good? Was it?
I think it was. I actually feel I was so lucky to be the only girl out there. I was very lucky in different ways. So it meant anybody who had a wife, a girlfriend, a daughter, a mother, they would contact me because they all suddenly knew there was this woman that was out there guiding or instructing. So that worked for me. I also had a lot of guys who actually didn't like being told what to do by another man. So that worked really well for me as well. So it's been a win-win. It's been great being a female guide.
Fantastic.
And still is.
And we've seen an uptick in female anglers, helped no doubt by the 50-50 Orvis campaign. But are you seeing that? Are you sensing that?
There's definitely more women out there fishing. There's absolutely. This year particularly, I have had. Maybe it's because I suppose you get a higher profile sort of doing the Instagram thing, so maybe more women are knowing, or maybe it's word of mouth, I don't know. But I'm beyond all doubt, I'm getting groups of women now fishing corporate days on the test, groups of women wanting to do an instructor's day. I'm getting more girls coming to me for private lessons from all ages, from 9 to 60 to 70, all ages. So I think the 50-50 thing, it has really helped.
And you think that's been a driving factor, or do you think again it might be social media?
Sure, Orvis is a big company. They've got huge marketing, huge media presence, so it's got to have helped. Yeah, it's been fascinating seeing again with the Instagram. You can see that and sense more people out enjoying it. I know, my wife she's a salmon angler, she just loves casting a double hander and thoroughly enjoys that. And I love putting pictures up, and I have the joke that I'm always netting the fish. Yeah, you are always netting,
and it's great
fish,
and I just really enjoy that aspect of it, and it's been good to see that. And I think as somebody who's done a fair few lessons with ladies, they're much better to teach the men as well.
I think, the difference is that women don't try to force it. The hardest problem I have with guys is that they try to force the cast, and it's not the technique, it's their physicality that's doing it. So women do listen. Men kind of think they kind of maybe know how to do it, and but I don't find there's much difference actually teaching. I think it just depends on that person on that day, and it doesn't matter on the age either. I think children are great and they've got no fear of getting it wrong, so they will thrash a rod around. I find the hardest group is the 50 plus, because they've either got ingrained skills, which is difficult then to iron out those things that they've done for so long, and also they are worried about failure, and that's quite hard. They almost overthink it. The 30-year-old, 30 to 35, is the easiest group to teach, because they really listen and they really want to learn. So it just depends.
So what do you prefer? Is it guiding or teaching, or?
I love doing a mixture of both. I find guiding, in fact, we were talking about it earlier, Pete, and I, like you, I used to do sort of 120 days a year guiding, which maybe doesn't sound a lot, but I can tell you 120 days is a hell of a lot. And I found at the end of it, I was just wrung out. After the Mayfly, I was wrung out, and by September, I was almost crying. I was so tired. And the thing about guiding is when you turn up on that day with that client, they don't care if you've had 5 days out. They want you to be fresh as a daisy, happy, full of enthusiasm, passionate about what you're doing, and really helping them. It's not always about catching the fish. It's about having a lovely experience in a lovely place. And so now I limit my days guiding so that hopefully I give that experience. I would never give up my guiding, because I think it's important to know what's happening on the river. And I love it. I love meeting people, and I love seeing what's going on, and it gets me to all these different beats. But teaching, I love teaching, and I really love teaching. I like teaching beginners, because I hope that I'm teaching the right things right from the beginning. But what I love now is being able to teach advanced. And I've had more people, more experienced fishermen coming to me who want to do different techniques. They want to know how do we catch those fish under branches? How do we catch those fish around corners? How do we do this? How do we counteract that? I'm going out saltwater fishing. How do I do this? How do I gain my distance? And I love that. Or they turn up with 3 rods. We've got this new rod, but the line isn't right, so I'll turn up with 5 lines. And that is, I love doing that.
They're those light bulb moments, aren't you? You can see it when you're teaching somebody, when that it suddenly clicks into place.
It's just fantastic. And sometimes you get a surprise. Somebody comes, you turn up with something, and I had somebody a little while ago, I had all these different lines, and I thought the line I had would definitely work on that particular rod, and we ended up with an old-fashioned double taper on it. And I picked up the rod and thought, oh, that's sweet, pick it up. And he just looked at me, and that light bulb moment, he just said, I can't believe.
Nice.
And that's great. That's really satisfying to teach.
So you've been guiding a long time now. What do you think makes a good guide?
Ooh, all sorts of things. I think patience. I think you've got to be really patient, and I think you have got to absolutely love what you do. I think if you're not passionate about being on the river and helping, dare I say it, I have seen some guides out there, and I get the impression maybe they really can't be bothered. They're tired, and they'll just put, the person will be saying, why am I not catching fish? And they'll go, well, that's just fish. Not always, no, I disagree. I think you should always be... I'm always trying my hardest to change what we're doing. If something's not working, we'll try something else. If that doesn't work, okay, let's have a break. Let's look at some entomology. Let's take a river sample. Breaking up the day. And I think some guides... Maybe, not that I'm saying I'm better than other guys, but I think you've got to work hard. It's hard.
It's
Guiding
spotting
is
those
hard.
things, like you said, I think it's really interesting that it's spotting when somebody's struggling with something, well, not going through the same spiel every time.
Absolutely.
And
everybody's different, so
Yeah.
different. And also, I think it's really important is never, and I you know, in my younger days, you would get people catching maybe they do really well in the morning with really good hatch, and they keep slogging the water, and I would just let them. Now I won't do that, and I will because you just know they end up at the end of the day, they might have caught 6, well not 6, but they might have caught 4 in the morning, but those last 2 at the end of the day they couldn't quite manage. And actually you're almost better saying, do you know what, let's stop, you've had a really good day, let's talk about something else, let's do a bit of casting practice, so that they go away feeling they've achieved something, because that's important. And I have seen I never ever put somebody, sometimes I'll see a fish, a really difficult fish, under a tree or in a really difficult bit of the water, there's a fast bit of current. Now, if I don't think my client, and I'm not being condescending, I'm just trying to be realistic, I would never put them in that situation that they will have that possibility of failure. If I think they're up to it and I think they might enjoy the challenge, then I'll do it. But generally, I want them to have a really good experience, and then you keep notching up. Every time you see them, you go up a different notch. But I think it's really important not to to look after people well, to let them have a good day.
I think it's interesting. We'd sit down with people at the start of the day with a cup of coffee and ask them what they wanted.
Yeah.
And I think that's missed a lot in places sometimes.
Yeah.
That there is, right, we're taking you out, this is what's happening, and not asking what the person
I
wants
think
from
I
it.
try, I mean, a lot of stuff is now done by emails. It used to be by phone. It shows how long ago I was doing stuff, but it used to be by phone. Now it's all by emails, but I always try to maybe give them a call if they're a new client, to try and find out just where they think they're at, because they're not always where they think they're at when they turn up on the river. So having a coffee, generally, as you know, Pete, the minute you see that first cast on the river, you know. And usually, depending on where I am, as we walk to the river, you know, people are like, yeah, we're here, you're the guy, we just want you to tell us what flies. But I usually say, are you happy? Do you want 10 minutes, just a bit of tone up on your casting before we actually get on the river, or are you quite happy to go straight away? And usually, most people, when I say that, will go, oh, let's do that. And then you can pick up those little pieces, maybe help them a little bit before you, because once you're on the river, it's all happening. And then it can be very difficult. And you have to, everybody's different. There is a fine line on helping people. Some people, you've got to be careful you're not overcritical. And remember, they don't want to watch you casting. It's about them casting. It's about them and what they're doing. And you've got to, and sometimes you can feel people getting frustrated. And usually at that point I say, oh, do you mind? I just need to go to the loo. And I actually give them 15 minutes, just quiet time. Because I think, we all do it. I mean, you were talking about the pressure on you, and I've done it. I've been with somebody, Mr. Proctor is one who sometimes when I'm with him, because I know he's so good, he's one of the few people when I'm with, I will get nervous. Because I just think, oh, he's watching me, and he's, you know, and Paul's actually not like that. You know, he's not bothered, but I put it on myself. You know,
I see where you're coming from with that. But one of the things I did actually, I was thinking about when you were saying that, was studied body language, and you can see when somebody's, if they're right-handed, and all the guides who work with us when we've got them going, I said just watch their left hand and see how tense. And I had somebody once. And I was teaching him casting, and his left hand, he was right-handed, and his left hand was in a sort of Nelson
grip
position like this. I said, just relax a little bit. And he's saying, yes, I am bloody relaxed. And just say, let's go and pop the rod down. Let's go and have a look at the river for a bit. And then you get them back. And seeing those things, rather than trying to cast out of it.
I think I quite agree. And it's also, if you ever say, oh, could I just maybe show you how to do a men cast, and you you hold the rod and it's hot. Yeah. You can feel the rod's hot. You think, oh my God, they're in the death grip. But I like to think now that I, sort of thought that before it happens. and I also always try to carry chocolate and water. Chocolate and water, and just because you can, and my blood sugar dips now, and definitely when I'm out in the river, I will actually say, do you mind, I need to go and actually have some water or a coffee, because I can feel my blood sugar level, because you're concentrating. It's hard. Fishing's hard work.
It's tiring, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. So we sort of covered that really well and really interestingly. Let's go on to, somebody's got a day on the river, so you sort of touched on it briefly about tackle and stuff like that. You'd say something like a 9'4" weight stroke 5 weight would
10
be
full.
and all the stuff in between.
And all the stuff in between depends where you are. Where you are fishing. Sometimes if you're on wild fishing, then you might actually need a much shorter rod. That's the other thing. It just depends, and you're going after wild fish. What are you fishing for? Where are you fishing?
For a standard beat, what would a standard beat?
For a standard beat on the test, everybody's fishing with a 9'5". The vast majority of people up and down, but I am trying so hard to get people to change their tactics throughout the. Definitely getting in September time, August. You've got boiling hot weather, bright sunshine, fish have seen it all, will change, change everything, creep along. And that is the other thing as well. And it's not just the tackle, it's you. So I had, in fact, this will make you laugh actually, and I hope I can say this, but lovely Adam from Costa. Do you know Adam?
Oh, yes.
So Adam turned up, and he's a cracking fisherman. Anyway, Adam, this was last year, and he turned up to fish the Itchen with me. And of course he works for Costa, so he turns up in a white t-shirt with Costa emblazoned down the side, a white hat with Costa emblazoned on the top, and I think actually maybe his sunglasses were white as well. And I looked at him and I thought, you're never going to get near a fish. But Adam's a cracking fisherman. He was a long way back. He had a lightweight rod, long length leaders. He caught like a god all day. That's Adam, because he can do it. For my fishermen who turn up, and one of the things, because a lot of people bone fishing, they turn up in some very cool gear on the river, bright white shirts. Best of luck is all I can say. You want to be muddy coloured, you want to blend in, and also keeping a low profile. I appreciate when you get older, you can't always crawl along the bank, and that's harder. So in that case, get a long leader on, get as far away from those fish as you can. But if you can, I crawl. My knees, my knees, I'm starting to get a problem with one of my knees now, and I know it's from crawling along the riverbank. Also that thing of taking your time. I can't believe how many fishermen, sometimes quite often I'm looking after two people. One of them's more experienced, I will usually say, okay, you go right down to the bottom, or start halfway, and I'll, and then I'll come and find you later. So often I'll be in a beat, and within 10-15 minutes the guys come back to me and there's no fish, and it's like, what? Okay, and I'll come back, and he's just sped his way. He's not observed. And I think that the hardest thing, and one of the greatest things actually, and I know this will make you laugh, was actually fishing with Mr. Proctor in Iceland a couple of years ago. I was terribly excited when we got to the water, and Paul said, okay, we just sit. Okay, so we sat down and we're kneeling, and it's like, okay, Paul, when do we go fishing? So half an hour passed and we hadn't actually moved. He went, no, we just watched. Really? And it's like first rise, second rise, no, third rise, okay, now we can start to fish.
Fantastic.
And I tell that story to so many of my clients to try to get them to slow down. There's a lovely story of a lady who's in her 80s who fishes, and I believe it's down at Pittleworth. This story could well. Anyway, somebody told me the story. Apparently, she can't walk very far. She's elderly, so she goes down. She sits by the hut. She takes a coffee out, and she sits on a bench and she looks at the river. When she sees a rise, she goes out and she catches a fish. She then goes back and sits down, maybe reads the paper, goes back out. I think she's allowed 4 fish. Whenever she goes, she catches her 4 fish in that day, but she doesn't move from that bench. She catches them all on dry. And I think, to me, that says it all. Nice. The test is full of fish. Yeah. It's full of fish. Yeah. Wild, stocked, it's full of them. You don't need to be marching up and down.
You've got it in Winchester Cathedral, haven't you? And Isaac Walton's grave, Study to be Quiet.
I think very, very much so. And I think, and the other thing, dare I say it as well, people turn up with children, they turn up with dogs, and then they wonder why they're not catching fish. it's a serious business.
Yeah.
I mean, it is fun, and we should all be having fun. But I think if you want to get better, all these tiny increments, why are some people better than others? It's because all those, it's why is a tennis player really good? Because he's put all those tiny little things together, and that's what makes the difference in your fishing.
Excellent. Let's, we touched on it earlier, and our good friend Ian May, and we lost him suddenly.
Yeah, last year.
And incredibly sad. And I know from the Fly Culture magazine point of view that he was so excited about it, was phoning up all the time, and I try and keep his memory alive by including one of his photos in each copy. We've always had one in, and we'll have one in the next one that I'm working on at Windsor at the moment. And I know he did a lot of work with you as well, didn't he?
Ian, I met, I'm trying to think how I first met Ian. I was introduced to Ian. Basically, I needed a mentor when I decided to go down the AAP guy route. And Ian didn't live too far away. He was down in Fordingbridge. And so I was introduced to Ian, and I remember in fact, we went to Avington Fishery and had that first lesson. And Ian always had that kind of lovely smile, great big gentle giant. And he said, right, okay, I think I can teach you. He had the measure of me, and he was great, and I miss him dearly. He was such a lovely, kind person. He was like you. He was always phoning me just for a chat, what was happening on the river. He gave me nothing but encouragement in everything I did, not just in doing my AAP guy. He encouraged me in what I was doing on the river, because sometimes things do go wrong, or I would worry maybe I'm not good enough at this, and he was always positive about everything. And he was great fun to fish with. I loved having a day, and I won't forget, and in fact dear Jim Williams, who I know, after Ian died, there was I put some photographs up, and I had I won't, long story, but anyway, I was feeling really low, and I phoned Jim and Ian and said, can we have a day grayling fishing? And they both said, yeah, okay. So we met at the river on the Itchen, and Ian, of course, was never, although he loved his fishing, he actually just liked having coffee and taking photos and chatting, and he wasn't bothered. And so he turned up, in fact, with coffee and some Danish pastries, I think. And always said I never ate enough, always trying to get me to eat more. And dear Jim, and I came home at the end of that day, and I was on cloud 9, and I walked in, and my husband said, I knew you'd come back like this because you've been with those two. And I said, I had the best day ever. I can't even remember how many, I don't even know if we caught fish, but I'm sure we did, because in fact I've got photos. But actually it was nothing to do with the fish, it was to do with being with two top guys. And that's what, so fishing isn't just about catching fish, it's about all those friendships, and they mean everything, and they last forever. Those friendships.
So sadly gone, but we don't forget him, do we?
No, never. I've got photographs that Ian took around my house and on my computer and everywhere, and they're always there. And in fact, because I knew I was coming today, I saw one of my favourite photos that Ian took, and it was just because I know he was a great friend of yours to so many people. He gave so much to so many people. I just wish he was able to see the Finnish magazine, because he would have loved it. He would have been so proud.
Actually, his photo that I put in the first one was of you with a client.
With one of it, dear Jeremy, a great friend of his, and that's what Ian loved. He just loved it was the people aspect of fishing, which so many of us forget. We're so kind of, here's a fish, here's a rod, here's this. Ian's aspect of fishing was actually the people content. It was about the love. And he got that across in his photographs. It was the love and the scenes as well. His photos in America. That was the joy for him. It was the meeting people. He loved all of that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Is it always trout for you?
I love all my other fishing. So we'll go on to the trout in a minute. So my salmon fishing is my holiday time with my husband and with my family. And because I grew up in Scotland, it's always going home, and we've been going up there for the last 23 years now, I think, to catch salmon. I will always go to Scotland, and it's in my heart. And for me, having a salmon on, it's like a unicorn, and I fall apart. Honestly, you wouldn't believe I'd ever caught a fish when I have a salmon on. I am age 15, 12. The gillies are, Gilly, what is wrong with you? How many big fish have you? And I know, but it's a salmon, it's a precious thing. And I love it. So I never I never want to teach salmon fishing. It's a special private time, as far as I'm concerned. Bone fishing, permit, all of that. Holidays, getting on a plane with my husband, friends. I've got a really good bunch of great buddies, and we've been very fortunate to fish in some amazing places. And of course, my business partner Matt, very lucky to have Matt McHugh as my business partner, and we have lots of fun. And I've been lucky to go on some incredible holidays, and I love it, and I love the excitement. And there's nothing like having one of those fish just take off. But my trout is where my heart is. And it always will be.
And so do you have a dream destination? Is there somewhere you've always wanted to go that you haven't been?
I haven't been to New Zealand, and just from talking to obviously Matt and Paul and everybody who's been there, I love the idea of the beauty of it and catching those big fish. But I don't know, it's interesting. Iceland haunts me. I didn't get the better of it. It was the most technical fishing I've ever done. I can't even say where we were. The mini.
Oh yes, the mini villas. Yeah.
And it completely blew my mind. And it haunts me. I want to go back. But those fish rising to those midge all day long, I have never seen anything like that. And I just want to go back.
What was it about it that you found that you needed to dial in? Was it the drift? Was it the just picky fish, or what was it?
Where do I begin? So you go out there and talk about creeping. I mean, you're exposed out there. It's absolutely, the fish are in what is in effect like a swimming pool, because the substrate is lava, so it's down on the bottom, so there's not a lot of sort of hidey holes, weed growth, which at least when you're creeping along the riverbank on the test, you can sort of hide behind stuff, and they're hidden behind stuff. Out there, you stand out. So they can see you a mile off. So you've got to have really, really long leaders, okay? You've then got no wind, and you think, brilliant, and you can see the fish. And then you start to do the cast, the wind comes up, and it's all over the place. Really difficult casting. Or you have the opposite. It's really windy, choppy on the water, brilliant, you can see the fish rising, you get a bit closer to them, you go to do the cast, somebody's turned the wind off, and the fish take one look at you, stick the fingers up, and they're off. So it was a combination of everything, getting the drift right, getting the long, you're talking, I think Paul was on 20-foot leaders or something, long leaders in wind, and getting the right diameter of leader as well. Before I went out there, I've been using, I'm not going to mention brand, but I've been using certain types of brand on the test, getting away with it. Out there, it wasn't strong enough, and it wasn't thin enough. So you need super strong, super supple, super thin. So I've upped my game and all of that, and that's actually come to the test, and so it's changed my fishing altogether. Yeah.
And so when do you plan to head back?
Hopefully next year.
Brilliant.
Hopefully next year.
Fantastic.
I love it.
Last question. Can you believe we've done over an hour?
No, I can't. I can talk for English.
Yeah. What is your dream rod, your Hall of Fame rod that you would never part with, or you love?
Oh my goodness! What an interesting question. Okay, so I am one of these people that when I pick up different rods, it's like my new best rod. So depending on what rod I've picked up, so I don't really want to really mention particular brands, because I go through different phases, and also I'm using different tools for different things. So a client actually, and he no doubt will listen to this. I'm very fortunate. I get given some amazing presents, and one of my oldest loyal clients and his lovely wife, they gave me a sage naught weight, 7'6" sage naught weight. And I'm going to be perfectly honest. When they gave it to me, this is quite a long time ago, I thought, fantastic. When am I going to use a naught weight? When I fish the Rother for these little tiny wild browns, which you may have seen on my Instagram, it's 5 minutes from home. It's my time out. It's like Narnia. It's the prettiest, funkiest place, and I am so happy I'm there. It's so remote. It's marvelous, and I use that rod, and so that is a very precious rod. But when we haven't touched on this at all, but when I was doing, I'm trying to think I was doing one of my exams. I think it was the Gaia exam, and I had seen somebody had an angel. Do you remember the old Hardy?
The silver one, or the TE?
The TE.
Yeah.
And I had tried it somewhere, and actually, because it is so stiff, it means you don't get a lot of tip wobble on it. So actually, if you're in a way when you're not that good, it can actually be quite good for teaching a beginner, bizarrely, although it's very stiff. Later on, we know we actually want rods that bend. I like rods that really bend, through action rods. But in those days, I didn't know enough, and I saw this rod and I said to my husband, oh, this rod, and it was called an Angel. And at that time, I'd just been diagnosed with breast cancer, going through all that. Now fine, 14 years ago, it's all very long time ago, blah, 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 blah. But my husband sweetly went out and he bought it for me. And I will never part with that rod because it means so much to me. And but it is casting a complete broomstick. But actually, I quite like playing with it. So distance casting, if I just want to mess around, I love playing with it when I'm practicing distance casting. But for a fishing tool, I don't like it as a fishing tool, to be perfectly honest. Yeah.
It's interesting, one of the things that have come through that's been kind of interesting that people, and I've talked about a little bit as well, is a rod for playing the fish as well as casting. And like you say, a little bit more.
Oh no, I want something, so particularly nowadays, so I am using much, much lighter tippets. So I want a rod that is going to work on those, it's going to be able to pull, it's got that nice bend on it, absolutely. But also I want a rod that will cast properly, will work when you really get into the bend of it and you can bend it all the way through the rod. That's just a fantastic thing for playing the fish. And
I know you just mentioned there, and we talked off mic about it a little bit, and it's super great news to hear that you beaten breast cancer.
Well, I would never say beaten. You never say that. Never say that. Yeah, you never know. Well, fingers crossed. It was a long, long time ago. And it was, and actually for me, I never kind of like look back or think about it, but I was very lucky in that fishing, because at the end of when I was diagnosed, I thought I was, God, I'm going to die, and I'm never going to do anything ever again. And the fishing guides were really good in that they went, yeah, well, so what? Come on, we're still going to go out and go fishing, and what do you mean you can't take your exam? And I was like, well, I can't do anything. And all through my chemo, they took me fishing and they taught me, and they went, right, okay, this for the, in fact, that was Mac Lambert actually, and a lovely chap called Tony Richards, who is Hampshire Branch Salmon Trout, and he was master surgeon, and he gave me so much support, sort of mentally, and took me fishing. But Mac Lambert was just amazing, and he just wouldn't take any prisoners. He was like, don't be ridiculous, of course you can do the exam, don't be ridiculous. And I literally finished my last bout of radiotherapy and took the exam 3 weeks later. And Mac was stood there behind the tree, and I think Robin Gow, do you remember Robin?
Yes,
Robin, who's out there. Robin was my he was my what do you call it, not my instructor, my assessor at that time for Gaia. And and so it saved my soul. And now I try not to think about it, but of course I have a dear friend, we all know lovely Beaky, who's had a tough time, and so it's been great to be able to go hold a hand and go, look, I'm still here and I'm having a great time, and you've got your, it's going to be fantastic. Next year you're going to have a ball. It's going to be fun.
Brilliant. That's a nice positive note to end on, and I'm super excited about going fishing. So Gilly, thank you so much for chatting. That's been absolutely fantastic. I really, really enjoyed listening to that. Your passion for the chalk streams as well. This is Pete Tiger signing off on the Fly Culture podcast. If you haven't seen it, Fly Culture is a quarterly magazine. 100 pages of content. We're completely independent. We have all the usual social media channels. We keep the Facebook and Instagram pages up to date, so we post stuff every few days on there. We've also recently, thank you Dan Foster for updating our website as well, and we have got a super nice, clear, clean website now that we put content on. Although we don't do it in the magazine, we put tackle reviews on there as well of bits and pieces that we have bought and tried out. So they're on there for people to enjoy. We also include old articles as well. So people, if you haven't seen Fly Culture, you'll get a really good idea of the articles that are actually on there. If you want to visit Fly Culture website, it is flyculturemag.com. So you can find all the details there. And like I say, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all those sorts of bits and pieces. I will be recording another podcast really soon. I hope you've enjoyed this one as much as me. And thank you very much for listening. So this is Pete Tiger signing off, saying thank you very much. And we hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, let us know. And also, if you listen via iTunes, if you could leave us a review or say you've liked it, or perhaps if you haven't, but hopefully you have. We keep the mic running on these, so it's not edited. It is as it happens. So it's like the magazine, really honest and straight up. So we hope you've enjoyed that, and hope you'll listen real soon. So thank you very much indeed.